Hello, everyone. Welcome to Latter-day Struggles. This is your host, Valerie, and I have Nathan here with me. Hi, Nathan.
Hello. Good to be back.
It is good to be here with all of you today. We are beginning a three-part series here on Latter-day Struggles 2.0, Transcending and Including Mormonism, where what we're going to dive into is an exploration of 4 different kinds of engagement with spirituality. Okay, so just as a little bit of a heads up before we jump deeply into this series, this is a complex topic, somewhat messy, and I think you're going to enjoy it, in part because it's just like really interesting, like all of the other things that I think we talk about, but also we've gotten some feedback that you all like when we sort of wrestle right alongside with you. And what we have decided to do, not because, well, it's somewhat strategic, but it's also because as Nathan and I study these topics together, we kind of come up with our own questions and like, how about this? And what do you think about that? And so we're actually working through this ourselves as we go. So our hope is that maybe we're just a tiny bit ahead of you, but only maybe just a tiny bit, which kind of makes it fun, right? Because this is like, to me, I mean, I could be wrong on this, but I'm not convinced there's anyone else in Mormon discourse talking about what you and I talk about here on Latter-day Struggles when we talk about this kind of philosophy meets spirituality at these deepening levels of kind of like higher or deeper levels of spiritual engagement. That's what you and I do here. And so we give ourselves lots and lots of grace that we are not experts by any stretch of the imagination. And we're certainly not experts when it comes to Mormonism because we've never heard anybody else talk about this. Anything you want to say as we jump in, Nathan?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. To say that we're wrestling and learning as we go is really important, right? Because some of the things we talk about today, we may have different opinions 12 months from now when we have grown ourselves. And so all conclusions are held provisionally, is one of my favorite quotes from Anthony DeMello.
If all goes well as we look at how we engage with spirituality, each and every form of spirituality can, in fact, build on the form before it, and that we can add form number 1 to form number 2. And then onto that form number 3. But when we look at form number 3 and 4, that doesn't mean we throw out 1 and 2. It means that they are cumulative. Okay, and so that is going to apply also to this. When I started talking about transcendence and inclusion in Mormonism, I did so with confidence because I am convinced that this is a pattern that is without exception how human beings, divine in nature, and all things develop into more and more complex forms of reality. So this is still true today. And also keep in mind that as we walk through these 4 different forms of religious or spiritual engagement, that anyone can stop at any given point. And if one does stop at any given point, this does become somewhat, maladaptive. But everyone has the potential to continue to engage with spirituality at deepening and deepening levels. And the hope is that our life's experiences give us the opportunity and the appetite to develop into deeper and deeper spirituality. However, if we decide that one form of earlier spiritual engagement is sufficient, that's when we can have some problems. Okay, so those, I think there were some lots there that I sort of gave you sort of a forecast of things to come. Now let's go ahead and jump into these 4 forms of spiritual engagement. I'm going to go ahead and name them. We're going to just go through one today for the rest of today's episode. And then we're going to jump into numbers 2, 3, and 4 in episodes 2 and 3. So the earliest form of spiritual engagement is that of belief. Then we move on to faith. Then we move on to spiritual experience. And then finally, we move into embodiment. Now, I'm not saying that people can't have belief as the foundation of the structure of their spirituality, because as we mentioned, this is transcendent and inclusive. So those who move through the deepening stages of spiritual engagement generally began like we would in Mormonism in primary, believing about love and sharing and Jesus and things like that. And then, of course, we throw the beliefs out that cease to resonate with our building and increasing spirituality. But the foundation is, in fact, belief at the very, very beginning of our development. So it is basically the way you manage your anxiety And therefore, the beliefs become the insurance policy. And if you're interested in this, we sometimes, Nathan and I did a really fun series that we've gotten a lot of really good feedback on. That is, let's see here. I thought I had my notes on this. It's called Exploring Mormonism's Immortality Projects. I think it's episode, I want to say 394, but it might be 374. I'm sorry. I have the title and it looks like I didn't write the number down. But the entire series is actually about how humans in general, but we really locked in on Mormonism, how we have these anxiety management transactional ways of thinking about this life and the next life that basically means if you believe, say, for example, in a prophet, in the temple endowment, in all of the ordinances in the temple, then you will be okay and have heaven. That is a belief management system. The hope would be that you embody a life of goodness and love and service, but it's really more so about making sure you believe the right way.
I think we do get obsessed sometimes
Yeah.
with having the right beliefs. And I think the problem is that it's not just our church, a lot of Christian churches have moved into this idea that believing the right way is how you get back to heaven, right? So we have this, for example, this doctrine that says if you don't believe that Jesus Christ is the savior of all mankind, not having that belief will then make it where you can't be saved by Jesus. And so if I don't believe maybe some of the literal stories that we tell about, Jesus suffering and dying for my sins, if I don't believe that, then I have been taught that I will be condemned. So we therefore hold on tightly to the right beliefs because we see them as being protective. And they manage our fear systems around an angry God, around unworthy human beings, and about some big impasse between humans and God that has to be bridged, and it's bridged by belief. And so the right belief saves us from this horrible, disastrous outcome that humans would have without the right belief. And so belief is, first and foremost, becomes a fear management system. Again, it's a good starting point for kids, but when we get into adulthood, we tend to hold on to it because of a fear management program.
Generally speaking, doing good, serving, helping one another, looking after the needs of those with less, one would hope that those are things, at least in theory, that everybody agrees on. Those are deep structures. Surface structures are how religious traditions sort of interpret and play these things out according to time and place. And so when we think about some of these beliefs, if we're thinking about values, we're probably going to have a lot in common, right?
Right.
When we think about, say, for example, the idea that family is important and all of us love and care for and want the best for our families. And we want to have the ability to be impacted by and connected to families for as long as we possibly can, whatever that mystery is in terms of, eternity. Everybody probably feels, pretty close to the same way. The Mormon temple endowment and all of the trappings there too, those are surface structures, right? You could look at each religious tradition and find different surface structures that are trying to make sense of how can we create a system or some ideas or some immortality projects that help me alleviate the anxiety of whatever it is that I am experiencing as a human being inside of the context of my specific belief system.
Right. So I think what you're speaking to is actually leading us perfectly into our next episode.
Yeah.
So I think unless you have something else you want to add, we should wrap up and
Yeah.
and pick up right from what you were just talking about.
Yes, love that. Okay, so let's just give a little bit of an overview. We're talking about 4 different ways of deepening engagement with spirituality, beginning with belief, which is what we sort of talked about today. Then from belief, we want to build on that as a necessary but not sufficient roadmap towards deepening spirituality. Onto that, next time we're going to be talking about faith, which then leads to the hoped for direct experience with the divine, which then leads to the embodiment of like the recognition or the adaptation of spirituality, not as a state that we come and go from, but as a trait or a way of being in the world. So we move from belief to faith, and then we build from belief, we build onto that faith. From that, we build upon that experience. And then from that, we adapt or become. Next 2 episodes, we're going to go through the rest of those, and we'll pick up from there. Thanks you all so much for your support, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Latter-day Struggles. If this podcast has supported your faith journey, we invite you to explore the many ways you can continue your healing and growth with us. On our website, you'll find support and processing groups, marriage and parenting courses, and free resources to support where you are in your faith journey. You can also join Valerie in the live fellowship gatherings throughout the year, where we connect, process the podcast, and build meaningful friendships with others on similar paths. If cost has ever been a barrier, we offer podcast scholarships funded by listener donations. To explore all of these offerings, visit the link in today's show notes or go to latterdaystruggles.com. And if this podcast has been meaningful to you, leaving a 5-star review is one of the most powerful ways to help others find this work. Latter-day Struggles is proud to be part of the Dialogue Podcast Network.
Dialogue Podcast Network.